Welcome. Thank you for joining today. We'll just give this another few minutes. We've had a few registrations, so we'll give it another few minutes before we get started.
Maybe one more minute, Divya, and then we can dive in.
That sounds good. We'll just give another minute for whoever else can jump in. For right now, I see some familiar names and faces to those names. Thank you to those who are here today. Looks like we should get rolling right now. We'll allow people to join in as they come in. We're 3 past the hour, 2 minutes past the hour. So again, welcome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for showing interest in our Circular Cleveland initiative. Kristen, do you have any housekeeping rules or?
Yeah, again, welcome everyone. This is the pre-proposal meeting for the Circular Cleveland RFP, which is issued by Cleveland Neighborhood Progress. A few quick housekeeping things while we get started. Of course, everyone, please stay muted. I hope this is not your first Zoom chat. Unless you are speaking, please stay muted. And if not, Divya, as a host, may mute you to just help with our audio quality throughout the presentation. Divya is going to give a brief presentation, kind of high level on the overall RFP and some background on the project. Some of this you may have already read through in the RFP, and then we're going to dive into questions. I'd like to ask that you please post your question, either post your questions in the chat or at the end you can raise your hand. We're going to do our best to get to as many of the questions as we can within the hour. If not, please feel free to send those to Divya, and we're going to be following up with an FAQ after the pre-proposal meeting. I don't know exactly when the FAQ will be up, but probably within the next couple of days. You will note that this meeting is also being recorded, and we will have a link to the recording on the RFP webpage as soon as it's available. So with that, I will turn it over to Divya.
Thank you, Kristen. Again, welcome everyone. Thank you for showing interest in our Circular Cleveland initiative. This project was funded by Robert Wood Johnson Foundation through their U.S. Solutions Global Ideas Grant Round, focusing on advancing health and equity and climate. This proposal, we learned about this award in October, so we've towards the end of October. Cleveland Neighborhood Progress is the lead applicant, and City of Cleveland is our essential partner here. That is one of the criteria for the grant itself. City of Cleveland's been on board with us for a long time on the sustainability journey, and then we have Cleveland Neighborhood Connections, our community partners who've been doing community small grants for over nearly close to 2 decades now. So they are our community partners on this project as well. They will be doing a component of this. We have here Ellen MacArthur Foundation. They are our thought partners. They are global thought leaders in the circular economy space. As we entered this proposal, we realized that we're going to need some strong capacity around this. Also now learning that there are several cities that are advancing the circular city initiative. So Ellen MacArthur Foundation's our thought partner here. Another partner that we want to mention, we don't have here on an informal learning level is we were inspired by Toronto across the lake here. Toronto has been involved in circular economy initiatives for the last few years now, a couple of years at least. The Cleveland model draws a lot of inspiration from the Toronto model. A lot of you here are in the circular economy space, so I'm not going to labor over this. Designing waste and pollution, a key criteria, keeping products in use for a long time, regenerating natural systems. And here we really also think about this as an opportunity to generate wealth and create, through innovation, through more workforce development. So you're all familiar with the whole concept of circular economy. So just moving on, what Cleveland wants out of this grant, again, we think of this as an opportune moment to envision our waste streams and how this is tackled. Cleveland has a dumping problem, so we want to take care of some of the environmental outcomes of waste. So we want to envision newer systems, improved health of our residents, quality of life. All these problems are interconnected, and we see that some of them will have solutions in themselves. So we think of, and then the next thing we do want to address, we rank number 11 in air quality. So we are hoping that sort of working on this is going to allow us to get better on those issues. We have a lead problem. We know that, some of these, we want that tackled. We're hoping that, our famed Cuyahoga River, which is now beautiful and pristine, will continue to, stay healthy as we advance these initiatives and keep our pollutants more contained or reduced. We want to use this as an opportunity to create wealth at different scales. We know that this is job intensive, and we also know that this is innovation area. So we want to think about how those things play a role here for Cleveland. Our approach here, we want to connect to the SDGs. We want to hear community priorities and work on that. We want to build on existing capacity. This is not a new thing for Cleveland. Cleveland's been on a sustainability journey for 15 years, and that's allowed us to have several projects across the landscape of land, across the landscape of food and nutrition. So we're hoping this is going to be an opportunity to build on that. Several projects are there, so we hope that collaborations will begin to develop, foster innovation, again, create those new economic opportunities. We're really hopeful that this is going to spur a new system of thinking and build climate resilience through this whole approach. Again, these are our SDGs. We want to say that we think about these things as we connect to our Cleveland Climate Action Plan, which again talks about energy efficiency, clean energy, sustainable transportation, vibrant green spaces, and again, local food, all these things that are addressed at different capacities through several initiatives and hopefully tied more closely through this. Equity has played a critical a critical concept in how we've been advancing sustainability in Cleveland right now. 2 years ago, we took the Cleveland Climate Action Plan on the road to several neighborhoods and to see what works in those communities and what doesn't, and sort of build on some of those things. So we're hoping that this process only builds more on that platform. Going to this grant itself, it's a 30-month grant that started in October, last of 2020. It takes us through April of 2023. The first part of it focuses on developing that roadmap that we will that's going to guide us through this implementation. The roadmap and the implementation process, we hope will take the chunk of the year. Will take the year this year. And then the implementation process itself, which has in it, some small incentives to small and medium industries. We have in it implement it to a compost contract with the West Side Market that we will make sure that happens, kicks off. In this phase, we'll also have a working group that will advance some of the goals of what comes out of the roadmap itself. Again, Cleveland Neighborhood Progress was the lead applicant for this. Neighborhood Connections is a key partner. They'll help us take this on the road, ground this with the community, and City of Cleveland really is the one that's driving a lot of our pathways to some of these processes, looking at policy and how do we advance some of these things. And our core team has members from all these three groups. Right now we have the core team builds to a total about 9 people as it sort of in its full capacity, and this is who we see that the consulting team will be reporting to the core team. The overall budget for this project is $476,000, which is divided into 4 components. And then we have here, we will be doing, again, composting at the West Side Market. We'll send out bids, we'll figure out what's the, and include what composting, we think of it as the last leg in this process. We have grants to the community, so that small grants to the community, up to about $5,000 that will allow the community to have access to some of the capital that will allow them to advance circular economy in their own ways. Again, economic incentives will be given through the City of Cleveland to small, medium enterprises that are keen on advancing circular economy. They might be existing companies, they might be ones that come out new, we don't know. We are allowing the roadmap process to guide a lot of this. Again, just going to the roadmap itself, it is formed out of an interaction of data. Again, this data is the consultant is going to drive the data analysis component based on what what we have already in place. We don't know what we don't know, so the consultant's going to find out some of those things. And then this data is going to be supported by information and data that the subcommittees and the committees will provide. This is the steering committee. This is a group of people who are involved in different areas here in Cleveland that may touch circular economy, which we think people who we think are touching circular economy. We'll have a list, we'll have a committee, and then again we're going to rely on the expertise of the consultant to identify further gaps here that will gaps of sectors from which members will be sort of recruited into these committees. Community engagement, 10 of these will be feeding into the roadmap development phase. We don't. This could be in the form of Zoom meetings on the ground. We'll have to follow CDC guidelines as this moves forward. So we're going to keep this flexible. That brings to the question what kinds of tools and technology we'll use to this. We're thinking multimodal. Again, Zoom platforms and in person. Again, when we're talking about softwares, what kinds of surveys do you want that you will use? What kinds of cloud gathering tools are you going to use to get the best outcome to capture the data and also to be able to share it outward through the roadmap? And then we're hoping that the landscape analysis here will tell us what's already in place, what policies are in place, what is the socioeconomic situation here, and what then will take us to get to an envisioned goal based on our community priorities and the expertise that as consultants you will bring to the table. Then you'll help us identify, the consulting team is going to help us identify the focus areas based on what you learn here in Cleveland, and then help us focus that effort more into 6 to 8 areas based on what you've learned. And then this is going to help us foster those collaborations. The consulting team is going to, give us policy recommendations based on what you learn. Again, run this through what are our barriers, what are our enablers, what can we easily advance, what are some things that are going to take time? Is it going to be a quick process? Is it going to be a phased process? There is a lot of things here that we are relying on the consultant to give a comprehensive proposal that will tell us how you're going to help Cleveland achieve its, goal. Again, we're counting on the expertise that you have to show us what are the models of incentives that can work for communities, what drives, companies, what drives certain, this is a systems shift as we see it. So we do think, again, data is in the devil. The devil's in the data here. We're going to capture as much as we need in order for you to show us where we need to go, and also give that in the form of a roadmap too, so that the roadmap we see as a starting point to take us to the next place. Again, this is going to be how communities collaborate. So this is the scope of work that we envision for our consulting team that comes in. We're hoping for an implementation guide that comes with this roadmap that's going to tell us how we're going to go ahead and implement this. Towards this end of this phase, the steering committee is going to transform into a working group. That working group is going to take on the priorities identified in this roadmap and take it to the next level. Whether it means pursuing the next level of opportunities, whether it means building on what's existing right now, that's up to what comes out of the roadmap and the interactions within the communities and the subcommittees. But we do envision quite a robust process here, knowing that this is a very well-received concept here just on our first month engagement, knowing the engagement of the community around the waste streams in the sector. So we know this is going to be a very involved process at different levels. Again, some dates to remember. The submission comes, the proposals are due on the 1st of the month, next month. Our selection process will take about a month, and we'll make that announcement on the 1st of April. So we ask that if we have shortlisted some agencies, that you keep the week of March 24th to 31st available, so we might be able to schedule some time with you to learn a little bit more about your approach, your methodology, and everything based on what you've submitted. The process itself, the grant requires us to turn in a roadmap towards the end of November, towards the beginning of November. hopefully there is no new curveballs. We've seen a lot in 2020. Hopefully we've learned how to handle a lot of these things, and we've learned we are resilient. We'll make things on the go. If nothing, is that critical, then we're staying on track. If there's got to be any change at all, it has to go through the ground team to find out how what that process looks like. And then that's really where we are right now with dates. Again, after that, of course, the working group will take over some of those responsibilities. So the contract period itself, we're thinking that the contractors will be in place starting April all the way until November, when the roadmap is handed over. Just some small updates based on the RFP itself. I just needed, there was some change in the numbering. It did not change any of the content, just got renumbered. There are a couple versions out there. That's the only thing. And then the other thing is just to make sure that hopefully we'll receive a lot of proposals. So just make sure in terms of format that you're putting your name in there in the subject line as you sort of do that. In partnerships, we encourage partnerships here based on what you want. This is a question we've had. So I think we're not going to limit partnerships. We ask that you partner based on how you think is fit, but one lead applicant per proposal. I've seen several individuals from different chapters of the same company apply. So if you have distinct proposals, we welcome that. Again, there is no limit to that. With that, I end this presentation. I'll open it up to questions if you have any. Some of you have already given us some questions, and we'll take it from there.
Divya, I think one thing I'd like to add in there that I did not see captured in the important dates to remember is the last day for questions is February 19th, so a week from this Friday. So of course we're going to do our best to answer as many questions as we can here today, but any emailed questions must be into Divya by the 19th, mostly so we can get you responses in a timely fashion before March 1st. So I'll put that in the chat as well.
Thank you, Kristen.
So as I mentioned at the beginning, please either include your questions in the chat box or feel free to raise your hand, and I will do my best to call on you in the order that I see hands raised to ask your question in person.
Kristen, do you think I should just go over the questions that have come first so we can address them and see if there's anything new?
Yeah, I think, one of the big questions that we've gotten a lot is about budget. So I think it is worth addressing right now. We are not sharing our budget for the overall roadmap development, but you can see the full project budget. We encourage all of our proposers to be as competitive as possible. Cost will be a factor for us, and as necessary, once we narrow down that short list of proposers, we will, we may have to do some negotiation around scope to make sure that it fits within our project budget, but as well as the objectives of the overall project. So I know that's a big one that I want to just get out of the way right away. Divya, if you have other questions, feel free to throw those out there.
Sure. I think the other question was in terms of the inventory, the landscape mapping. If we wanted to see that in a catalog or a geospatial format, I think we want to say that we like you to submit estimates for both. We would like that catalog format for mostly because that's easy to share. Most people have access to looking at those kinds of things, but we know that we want to democratize data so people are able to collaborate freely. So we will look to transfer it into a geospatial format. So that was one question that we did receive. So please give us your estimates for, again, we're looking at creative methods of being able to share all this information for us to be able to use this information going forward. Would like to see that come through in the proposal. So reflecting your methodology so that your roadmap shares that. Um,
And really quick, I just want to make sure I'm clarifying. I know I mentioned that we shared the overall budget. That is not exclusively for the roadmap. That is also divided up between our small business incentives and our neighborhood grants. So we do not have 475,000 to put towards the roadmap. I just want to be clear. Mostly again, so you can be as competitive as possible when you're applying. Divya, I do have a question. What is the status of the data collection effort underway in another contract? Do we have another contract?
can you ask the person who's, can we elaborate on that
Sorry.
question? What kind of
There we
contract?
go. Matthew, please go ahead.
Yeah, my understanding is you were collecting waste data for the community. And my understanding is you've got somebody doing that for you that would obviously line up with this effort. And I just wanted to see, is that process on track? Are you thinking you're going to get the quality of data you need? Am I incorrect?
You are correct in that the city of Cleveland has a contract currently with GT Environmental to analyze our entire waste collection operation. I expect that we will have sort of the results of that shared later this month, early March at the latest. So in terms of timing, I think it will coincide well with the execution of this contract for this RFP. However, and I think, many of you who are familiar with the circular economy are pretty aware, our intention is to capture that waste long before it ends up at our transfer station and ultimately in our landfills or at our MRFs. So, I think we are, of course, our recycling efforts are going to be, a piece of this puzzle, but there, I think, are a lot of other sort of moving parts that we are hoping that our consultant will bring to the table in terms of how we address some of the waste streams before they hopefully even become waste streams.
Thank you, Kristen. I actually wanted to just make sure that, so we mentioned 4 components for the budget. Again, there are 4 components there that, we have to bid out the composting at the West Side Market too, in addition to some of this. So the budget is tight and competitive. Somebody did ask us a question about our EMF partnership and where we are in the process of getting in the network. We are talking to them because this is a 3-party engagement. It's taking a little bit longer for us to understand the right process, but we should, by the time we onboard the consultant, we should have answers on the network itself. We should be in the network by that time.
There were also questions around the community engagement side of things. So one of the pieces that I think is worth noting is that our core project team intends to lead a good portion of that community engagement work. Those of you who are familiar with Cleveland and or our climate action planning process, that was something that we worked very collaboratively with CNP to host those neighborhood workshops, but we will also be looking to you as the consultant to help guide some of the content, some of the questions that we should be asking, maybe how we facilitate those conversations so that we can ultimately get the most out of that from a resident feedback perspective, but also resident potential when we think about those neighborhood connections grants. We're going to be issuing a round this year, but we also plan to have a second round in the subsequent year of the grant, and really want to make sure that we are being as intentional as possible, and we'll look to you to provide some of that guidance and those guidelines, as Divya noted earlier.
Just one more thing to add to that is we will definitely look to the consultant to help us time those community engagement sessions, just so we are capturing things at the right time to the needs that you have in there as well. So it's another thing to do.
And we anticipate the bulk of those are going to be virtual, just given the nature of our pandemic situation right now. As much as we would love to be in person, and if things change drastically over the next 6 months, maybe they may be, but we're expecting that those will be primarily virtual engagements. I have not seen any other hands raised unless I'm missing anything. So again, Kathy, Divya, if you see anything, let me know.
I'm going to try to touch on a question from that I received through email regarding community engagement. Can you provide specific areas, context on areas below? Where do climate ambassadors fit in the overall concept? Are they stewards of circular economy? So Cleveland has a history of having worked with climate ambassadors. And these climate ambassadors, we know are residents from the community who know their neighborhood really well, know the projects that are happening, know what needs to happen. And circular economy ambassadors, we are thinking about those in a similar context as people who will take this information both ways, sharing with us what the community is looking at and taking back to the community what they're learning, being a part of steering committee. So we do anticipate a few of them coming into the steering committee. We are outlining some of those roles as we sort of, by the time we have more of an understanding of who we're going to be working with, we should have more answers on that as well. What content do you want to engage the community with? Data analysis, circular economy principles, vision for the city, feedback on the roadmap, all of this. We do want to keep the community as informed as they can so we can get from the community as much as you need to help us build out that roadmap for this initiative. Another question, what role does the consultant have in grant reporting? The consultant will only provide an overall report of the roadmap process to us, including the roadmap. The grant reporting, the grant itself is a 30-month process. So part of the reporting lies on the project management team to do some of that. But the consultant holds the responsibility to engage with the core team on a regular basis as we sort of lay out in the work plan that you will sort of share with us.
And I think one point worth providing some clarity around is sort of post roadmap implementation. So we have those small business incentives that will be issued through the city's economic development department, the neighborhood connections grants, which will be focused on residents. But we also are hoping to develop a working group that's going to be application based. So similar model to what Toronto has done around their circular economy work. And really that group is through the application process going to be tasked with helping to make sure we actually implement what comes out of the roadmap. You know, we don't want another plan to just sit on a shelf. So we want to have some very clear guidelines on how not only us as the core team, but really this working group of key stakeholders is going to help drive this work forward and really transform our economy to a more circular one, while also hitting the other objectives of the goals and improving health, advancing equity, et cetera. Are there any other questions, or did we do such a good job laying this out and writing the RFP that you all know exactly what you're going to be proposing on? Divya, do you have any other? Matthew, go ahead.
Yeah, I wonder if you could just spend a little more time clarifying the division of labor between the consultants and your partners. In other words, I was starting to hear that maybe the consultant isn't organizing those 10 community workshops, that's, you know, your group is going to be organizing those and the consultant would come in and assist with content. Because that's you've got appropriately so, a pretty intensive community engagement there. And the question is, how much of that cost is going to be borne by the consultant in doing that kind of boots on the ground organizing versus being there as your kind of intellectual support for content?
Well, we do see that as people here, we might be able to, make sure that the meeting happens, calling the people together. But I think in terms of how of the community engagement, what kinds of community, whether and the details of which kind of community you want to engage for what context, how the focus group is defined, when it is defined, and a lot of that we will be relying on the consultant in addition to relying on the content. But we'll be putting together, we'll be able to facilitate bringing the community together to that platform. Kristen, that capture?
Yeah, I think that sounds just about right. We recognize that a number of you are not here locally in Cleveland, so we expect that it's sort of our responsibility to help make sure that those meetings are set up and that we are doing as much as we can to promote them and get the right people to participate. But to Divya's point, we will look to you to be that sort of knowledge partner to make sure that we, again, are, we can host community meetings in all sorts of different ways, but in order to provide as much context for the overall roadmap as possible. You, as the consultant, are welcome to participate in those meetings. We can always record them as well, and you can just watch them afterwards. And those, again, may be some things that we negotiate during sort of the final contracting phase to make sure that we are able to maximize our budget as much as possible.
That's right, Kristen. I think a lot of those engagements, we will talk about how many of them we'd like for you to be there in order to make sure that you hear exactly what we're hearing too. So it's not running through that filter. So
thank you. That's helpful.
Any other questions, or Divya, anything that you've received via email that you think is worth noting to the group?
I am just going through my list to make sure we've touched on things. If anybody who sent me an email is here and wants to clarify something further, we're happy to do that now. Talked about the gap analysis.
All right.
We've touched pretty much the questions that we've received. We just probably want to stress a little bit about the work plan document that'll sort of come with the roadmap itself. So we sort of want to try to keep to a schedule when we get the roadmap process started. Somebody did ask us a question about the consultant's experience and expertise, if that's a testament to, if we are requiring a quality control, what we'd like is to understand your track record, your capacity. We're not looking for years of experience, knowing we know circular economy is new. We'd love those years of experience, gives you, lived experience and the knowledge. But we're looking at how you've done this over the course of time, what cities have you worked with, and how have they sort of shown through some of these roadmaps that you're working with on them. So that's important. So do give us a three references, not older than 2017. I know a lot of you are still in the process of new cities and new roadmaps, so it's going to be helpful for us to learn from our peer what the experience is. Yeah.
I think we are very excited to receive your proposals and see how you will help support Cleveland transforming our economy to a more sustainable, more circular, and more equitable one. If there are no other questions at this time, I'll give a couple more seconds here just so I'm not rushing too quickly to close this meeting out, but we will go ahead and close the pre-proposal meeting. Again, the recording will be available on the RFP webpage, as well as responses to some of the FAQs that we've received so far. And again, a reminder, the final day for questions is February 19th, and those questions can be emailed to Divya, and I dropped her email in the chat box there.
Thank you, Kristen.
All right, well, thank you all. We appreciate your interest in this.
Thank you so much.
Have a great week ahead.